Hey, you want to get out of here fast, right? So if we have more people, y'all niggas been trying to something.
I wanted to do this forum before he got into the selection of the police chief. I didn't want to do interviews with chief candidates until myself and members of the committee and hopefully the candidates, because I've suggested that if they're not here, they should watch it streaming, and if they don't watch it streaming, they should watch it otherwise, because I'm going to have questions that relate to what kind of comments we've heard from the community. So this is an important part of the process. It's something I think it's important that whoever the next police chief is understands what the expectations and concerns of the community are, so that they have a better understanding of what we're asking them to do as the next Montgomery County police chief.
We just passed a bill, criminal justice reform bill that I sponsored, Law Enforcement Trust and Transparency Act, to require, thank you, to require independent investigations and to have the report be made public, because we need transparency and accountability. Those are key components to public trust in the police. We have more work to do. We're working on other legislation. This is part of that process that the county executive mentioned. We have a clear goal here. We just met, the county executive and I, with about 50 young people who were sharing with us their experiences with law enforcement off the record in a roundtable discussion. And what's clear is that depending on who you are and what you look like, law enforcement happens differently to you based on your race, your immigrant status, where you are. And so we're going to hear from you directly and hear these stories, but know that we know that and we have work to do. As Marc said, we have a unique opportunity, the new police chief in 15 years. We have a new council, a new county executive, so we are attuned to this, and we want to take action, make sure we get the right person in to set the right culture. The county executive appoints, and I want to credit him for doing this process and also having a public process where there's going to be community input in the interviews, so I want to thank him publicly for that. But the system's out of balance. You look at our statistics, African Americans make up 19% of the population. They account for over half of the arrests in 2018 in the county. If you add Latinos, they account for 27% of use of force and arrest and are only 20% of the population. So we have our people of color comprising over 75% of arrests and use of force situations here in the county. And when you look at that and you see the recent things that have happened in White Oak and other places, and we're getting ready to commemorate the 1-year anniversary of the killing of Robert White in Silver Spring, an unarmed black man who was walking in his neighborhood, we can't have policing happen the same way with these types of outcomes. It's not okay. And that's not to say that our men and women in law enforcement are bad. They are working, many of them are good people working hard, but this system is flawed. And this is a national problem, and we're not immune here in Montgomery County. So we need to work on this. We commit to working on it, and we're here to hear from you about your experiences so we can make that progress.
I'm here today because I'm certainly concerned about the incidents that I've witnessed since living here, especially the murder of a young man last year. I'm a mother. My son is here with me. I have 2 children in Montgomery County Public Schools. And since we've been here and since we have witnessed and experienced the fact that now that I live in a part of Silver Spring that is sort of segregated from other parts of the county, I see that the schools are segregated, and you all do a good job of projecting to the world that this is a very wonderful place to come and live, because that's why I chose this community. But now my son goes to a school that is predominantly black and Latino, and that in and of itself isn't a problem. It's just that I actually thought that all the schools was that way until I realized that schools in what's considered the western part of the county versus the eastern part of the county. And so I'm noticing that policing is also done that way.
Supposed to be telling us, putting data out about all searches related to traffic stops. That data is not on Data Montgomery. It is not available to the public. What is available, the limited information that is available, is incomplete and inaccurate, while there's law that says it should be completely available. I would like to encourage you to do something about that immediately. Make sure a new chief is dedicated to that kind of information being public. And I want the more information about what the police department is doing at the rank and file level that's available to the public, the more we can monitor what's going on and see whether what's happening is what should be or not.
Several years ago, I represented Montgomery County on the Attorney General's task force on the use of tasers, and it was that task force that determined that the taser should be labeled not as a non-lethal weapon, but as a less than lethal weapon in the use of force. I have represented Montgomery County on several national committees with the chiefs of police organizations and the Department of Justice to look at community policing in the U.S. In these many meetings, I had the opportunity to meet folks both as citizens in uniform and found that Montgomery County does not have a bad police force. In fact, our department is well respected among those in the country. However, it is not to say it is a perfect organization, and there is always room for improvement. In my serving, I had the chance to meet and discuss concerns in other police communities. I assure you that there are no perfect departments in America. I have been personally involved by personally interviewed by search groups looking to hire officers from MCP to take leadership positions in other departments across the country because of Montgomery County's respected leadership. Montgomery County is no longer a bedroom community, but is now a full-blown urban community with all of the concerns that come with that title, and I'll be through in just a second. When you look at many of the major cities and counties, Chicago, Philly, in the states, Arizona, Florida, and other places, including our DMV, and the list goes on, of departments we may draw from, the only place you may find the perfect match is right here in Montgomery County. Marcus Jones has been named interim chief because he is highly qualified to lead the Montgomery County Department. He has been involved in Montgomery County communities for his entire time in the department. He knows the communities and has worked in harmony with the residents and businesses. He is and has been a respected leader, and that is why he has earned the rank of assistant chief and now interim chief. I think, along with a host of other residents, that he has the skills, the knowledge, and the vision to lead the department into the future, and without hesitation should be made permanent chief.
I'd like us all to take a second to remember Khalif Browder, who was a juvenile arrested in 2010 as a 16-year-old. He endured solitary confinement as a juvenile. Because of that, he ultimately committed suicide 3 years ago in June for a case that ultimately got dismissed. Now, I bring that up because just a week ago, 10 minutes down the road at Northwood High School, there is a young man who is 18 years old who was arrested for cannabis-related charges for a street value of $450. He is now looking at 20 years in a cage. He is a young black male. He was a high school student. In the same week, Maryland accepted 160 applications for grower and processor licenses of cannabis in the state of Maryland, and they've already issued 100 dispensary licenses for people to sell it. Now, if this young man had investors, if he had some entrepreneurial spirit or the backing of Big Canna, then maybe we would be congratulating him and hailing him as the youngest black dispensary owner in the country. Maryland is actually, I believe, still home to the youngest black dispensary owner in the country at Marion, Maine, but maybe it would be this young man instead of him looking at a cage. So what I'd like to say today is that I do not believe this is a good use of policing efforts and resources. It's not a good use of Montgomery County or Maryland resources, and it's definitely not a good use of our tax dollars.
And whereas there's been other interactions where, if I had a black friend sitting next to me in a car, I've had, for having a stoplight out, had my car searched, 3 or 4 cops come up, K9 units search my whole car apart, impound my car over, a minor emissions infraction and this sort of thing. So I've seen clearly how the difference in the treatment is based on how I appear and how the person in the car with me might appear. And on that tip, I also want to say I've heard a lot of people talking tonight about the issue of policing culture and sort of disrespect, aggression, escalation in place of de-escalation. And I think we really need to start there with the little stuff. If we maybe had some sort of a database where, not for like internal affairs or complaints that your rights were violated or a legal offense, but like to report when cops are behaving in ways that we just don't feel is professional, don't feel that they are acting right. In fact, I think the cop should give you a card with his badge number, his name, and like the website you go to basically like rate my performance. How courteous was I? How professional was I? Right? The same way, like a customer survey, customer feedback survey, right? So we can start cataloging, even and match it up with the body cam footage, review it. This doesn't mean you have to say every cop who makes a mistake is bad, but sit them down and say, hey, look, we've been seeing that this is how you're talking to people, and it's happening over and over and over again. We're getting these complaints, and the video backs it up. And we're seeing that there's patterns in terms of who you do it to, in terms of their skin color, their ethnicity, or whatever it may be. We need to start collecting this data so we can have a self-reflection and a growth process within the police.
We are fighting to stop the desecration of an ancient African cemetery in Bethesda, Maryland, where thousands of Africans who were enslaved on River Road now do not lie in peace underneath a parking lot owned by the Housing Opportunities Commission. Every month we go to HOC, Housing Opportunities Commission, and we protest the fact that they are continuing the desecration of this sacred space. Last month I was removed from the HOC, supposedly because I spoke a minute over my 3-minute period. Once I was escorted out of the building along with some other colleagues who are here with me today. The policeman proceeded to tell me that because he was friendly, there were certain things that he was not going to do to me. He started to talk about all the violence he could do to my body. He talked about how he could punch me, how he could hit me, how he could grind me into the dirt. So I asked him, I said, are you telling me that I am supposed to be grateful to you because you've decided not to hit me, not to punch me, and not to grind me into the dirt? This is unacceptable. And this is the very premise, quite frankly, of white supremacy. And it's that a white police officer felt he could open his mouth and tell me that he had a right to destroy my body. So we are asking everyone here, and the county executive knows about this. I've informed him as well as Will. I've called both of them. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten responses. But I believe in the people. I believe in us. And I believe we know that if this is happening to a black woman in Bethesda, Maryland, this is happening all over Montgomery County. And we are the people who are going to stop this insanity.
Thank you so much, Marsha.
Public hearings like this one, with the commissioners of Montgomery County. One had to do with the Planning Commission, where Casey Anderson was present and called out the police because we were quietly standing at the back of the room with signs that said Black Lives Matter. The other one was more recently at the Housing Opportunities Commission, where once again, the police were there in full gear. I would have thought maybe I was in Iraq, maybe I was in Syria, maybe I was in Afghanistan. Why do these policemen have to come in with full gear to drag Montgomery County citizens out of public hearings? These people are appointed by our county executive. We have to have people in place who respect the citizens of Montgomery County to freedom of expression. We go there to speak. We don't go with guns. What are the police doing there with full military gear to knock us down? This is the kind of thing that I plead to our county executive. I worked for him. I worked for his election. Please, get these policemen out of our public hearings. These commissioners cannot call them in to inflict harm, to threaten, to menace, and to incite violence. This has got to stop. We have to have a demilitarization of Montgomery County Police. Thank you.
Of the incident that occurred between the police officer and the young men at McDonald's, and list all the wrong actions the police officer conducted during that encounter. Once the list of errors are gathered, they must become regulations of what a police officer must not do. If a police officer is found guilty of these rules under the conditions that were encountered at the McDonald's, then accountability must be applied. last but not least, as we know, with our policies in place, the behaviors that the police officer executed gives individuals the supremacy to behave in a manner that the policewoman showed at McDonald's.
First, I want to thank everybody for coming out and talking tonight. It's helpful, and people said a lot of things that I'm sure are going to wind up in the discussion with the candidates for the next police chief. I have been very careful about what I say about a couple things. Robert White's shooting is one of them. I said I have been very careful about what I say about a couple of things that I think are important, because I'm in the position where I have to pick the next police chief. I do not want the next police chief and the candidates to know what I'm thinking so they can feed me back exactly what they know I want to hear. And so if I said what I thought about everything, then they would know how to respond. I've seen interviews like that before. That's not productive. So I'm going to have my questions, and I fully intend to raise a lot of issues as well as to share what my personal perspective is on a lot of this, because I think there's an enormous amount of validity in what people have said here. I will say something about Robert White that's I just think is Captain Obvious stuff. There was a moment in that tape, which I watched over and over again, where the police officer said, "I think I have cop by suicide." That dispatcher on the other end should have been trained that if somebody says, "I think I got caught by suicide," that's a call to the crisis intervention team. That should have been an automatic. And I don't think those things happen enough, and I also don't think we have the resources or have properly resourced that part of what we do in the county. So I just always found that as a glaring omission on at least two people's part in this case. I think, there's been a lot of talk about the endemic nature of this problem in the department, but this is part of a broader problem in society, and it's why when I ran last year, actually Nancy Navarro and I put in legislation that's going to require the county to adopt racial equity lenses, because racism is not confined to any one department, and frankly, it's not confined to departments of the county, but a lot of work has to be done in the community. And some of my friends have heard me say this before, but in the movie about James Baldwin, and at the end of the movie, Baldwin's asked, what are we going to do about it? I think it's like the Negro's problem. And Baldwin said, frankly, this is a white person's problem. I said, the fact that black people have to constantly think about what other people are thinking about them 24/7 throughout their lives, there's nothing that you can do that's going to change that. The problem is the people who have formed opinions based on what you look like. And that's what has to change. And that's the harder work that we've got to figure out how to engage in. But we're hiring a racial equity officer. Nancy Navarro is working with the council on creating legislation on a racial equity program in the county, and we intend to implement things that we can do at the county level to make the changes that at least address the things that we're able to touch and hopefully have a broader effect on the community. But this is important work to do, and this is not going to be simple. When we deal with the police department, this is not just an issue of leadership, but we need to engage the workforce. We need to engage the unions in this discussion. People have no idea how many times the unions have come forward and talked about this issue about profiling, or the issue about, what was the word for stops for pretext? Being encouraged to make stops for no legitimate reason in order to generate searches. The first place I heard from it was from people who were working on it. With the new chief, we're going to have a chance to change that. And that's one of the things I absolutely intend to change. But we need to engage the people who do this work every day, because part of the change has to involve them. And, you know, setting up, you know, two sides to this. I mean, I always felt Montgomery County was better than most, which doesn't make it perfect. It is good to see that people from our departments get promoted and picked by other people, but it doesn't mean that everything that was done was everything that needed to be done. And so I want to make sure that we make this decision. We pick a chief who reflects the concerns of this community, and that they have enough vision and can talk about what they want to do in a way that gives us confidence that things can continue to change. And I've said this before, I cannot think of a more important appointee that I have, because nobody else has life and death powers. Nobody else sets people or things in motion that the consequences of which can be extraordinarily bad. And so having the right person leading us through what I think is, it's a trying time for police, and some of these events have been really hard on the community and all of us. We need to make sure we get the right person out of this. So I'm going to make sure the right questions get asked. Your contribution tonight will make sure that the people who are looking at the chiefs have heard what people in this community expect from a candidate, and we'll be able to hear those folks' responses to the kind of questions I think are going to be raised. Questions from here and questions from other things that are of concern, you know, particularly to me. So again, I want to thank you for coming here, and thank you for sharing. But the last request I'd make is, if you ever have an incident where you feel that it didn't turn out the way it was supposed to, or didn't proceed the way it was supposed to, ask for the body camera footage. Anybody who's got a story to tell can say, I want to see the body camera footage of my incident. And that, I mean, the whole point of body camera footage was to put out there for people to see what actually happened. No more of somebody said this or somebody said that, but you got a camera now. So we've got the cameras. If it's not, I would not charge for it. That would be absurd. You'd never be able to get it. So I will follow up on that. But if you've got concerns and you've been involved in something you think needs examination, ask for it.
Thank you. It's been great to partner with you on this. I want to also thank everyone for coming and staying to the end and participating. I want to thank my staff who are here, all of them who worked hard with the county executive's team to put this together, and I know there's many of them here as well. You know, quickly, county executive mentioned the equity framework, and I just spoke to Council President Navarro yesterday about this, and we got the budget behind us. The intention is to build on the work of the previous council and have a bill in the fall that implements a racial equity and social justice lens on all legislation. And so that's a big commitment from this council. We're going to need community input on that. There's another big racial equity training up county in Germantown coming up in a couple of weeks. So if you haven't, I went to one yesterday with my young son who's 4.5 months. He started his racial equity training early, and in Long Branch in the community center where I grew up in that neighborhood. And so they're happening all across in smaller conversations as well, which is a good thing, which is what we're going to need. And that's where I wanted to just end. We need relationship in our community, and that includes with the police. And one of the big questions I'm going to be asking, the county executive appoints and the council confirms director nominees, and I think this nomination will be scrutinized and should be at the highest levels, because again, you're talking about life and death situations, taking people's liberty, in the solemn trust of protecting and serving our community, which is what the police, the power we vest in them, rightfully so. And we have to have relationship. And we're going to have a briefing in the Public Safety Committee, and I want to thank Councilmember Katz again, on community policing and to hear what the department's doing. But I think we need to expand that And I mentioned earlier some of the things I think we need to look at and how we are taking best practices from around the country and making sure that everything we do is about building relationship with community. It's not adversarial. It's not about going out and putting on your flak jacket and getting in the community. It's about building community. And I think there are many, I know there are many officers that want to do that work and want to be a part of that, including folks that are represented by labor. And so we need to have that conversation. Last thing I'll say is I remain optimistic because our police are dealing with what are societal failures. They have to deal with people with, at the end of the problem, mental health, poverty, educational failures, all these issues. And so they have to be equipped and we have to hold them to high standards. But it's a societal failure when there's an arrest. If we have to get to the point of an arrest and a ticket, we have failed as a society. And so we have to hold them accountable. We also need to do what we need to do in our other areas to make sure that people aren't coming to that level of poverty or wealth inequality. And Marc and I have talked about things that criminalize poverty and things that force police officers to enforce vagrancy and homeless and other things. There's other things we need to do to make their job easier and then hold them accountable. And I love the woman that mentioned mental health training for officers too. That's important. So you all really helped us tonight. You shared your stories. I want to acknowledge the trauma and the real pain that was expressed by so many, and I want to thank you for your bravery. Those of us, I have my own experiences, and many of us do, that with law enforcement, and these are hard things to talk about. And so I want to thank everyone for being brave and doing that. I want to, yeah, you can clap on that if you like. The last thing I'll say, I keep saying the last thing, this is actually the last thing. I'm actually the only person on the council that actually worked for the Montgomery County Police Department. People don't know that, and I worked 20 years ago as an AmeriCorps member in the 3rd District Station for a year. And many of my friends and mentors are members of the police department. There's a way to do this. This is not about being anti-police. This is about being pro-community. And there's a way to participate in policing and relationship in a way that can be positive for everybody, and we need to get there. But we have to realize that we're not there, and not run away from that. Is Montgomery County better than some places? Sure, but that's our problem in a lot of ways. We're better than a lot of people, so we rest on our laurels. And we have work to do. We can't just say we have the top 3 diverse cities in the country. We have to live up to the responsibility of having the top 3 diverse cities in the country. And so I thank you all for being here and look forward to working with you in the years and months to come. Thank you.